Imagine an empire so mighty. Its soldiers were feared across the known world, its legions undefeated, its cities filled with grandeur and wealth beyond imagination. Rome, the jewel of the ancient world, the ultimate symbol of power and order. Now imagine, for a moment, that all of this, its pride, its military might, its control over countless lands, could be shattered by what many would consider a barbarian tribe. This was no ordinary battle. This was a confrontation that would shake the foundations of the Roman Republic itself, leaving its leaders stunned, its legions humiliated, and its citizens trembling in fear. This is the story of how a group of fierce Gauls managed to humiliate the mighty Roman Empire, proving that even the most powerful civilizations are vulnerable to surprise, strategy, and sheer ferocity. Today, we will journey deep into the events of that fateful battle, exploring the strategies, the bravery, and the miscalculations that led to one of the most shocking defeats in Roman history. But before we dive into the chaos of swords and shields, let's make a pact. Watch closely until the very end, because this story isn't just history. It's a lesson in ambition, hubris, and the unpredictable twists of fate. And when you finish this journey with us, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video to explore even more stories that reveal the hidden truths behind history's greatest events. Rome, in the centuries leading up to the battle, had grown from a small city-state into a dominant force across the Italian peninsula. Its legions were disciplined, its governance system was efficient, and its infrastructure, from roads to aqueducts, was unmatched in the ancient world. Rome prided itself on order, strategy, and organization, viewing the tribal societies beyond its borders as uncivilized and weak. But the tribes of Gaul, modern-day France, and parts of Belgium were no ordinary barbarians. Fierce, independent, and united under strong chieftains, the Gauls had a history of resisting foreign invaders. They lived for war, not conquest. Their society valued courage and personal honor above all else, and when they fought with a ferocity that even the Romans found difficult to match. The stage for confrontation was set as Rome sought to expand northward. Roman commanders underestimated the Gauls, dismissing them as poorly organized and inferior in tactics. The Romans marched with confidence, believing that their superior training and weaponry would guarantee victory. However, the Gauls, led by brilliant leaders who understood both terrain and human psychology, had other plans. They had been observing Roman movements, noting weaknesses, and preparing an ambush that would shock the empire to its core. The initial skirmishes were small, almost ceremonial, and the Romans celebrated minor victories without realizing they were being lured into a trap. The Gauls used guerrilla tactics, striking supply lines, cutting off reinforcements, and creating panic among Roman ranks. Their knowledge of local terrain gave them an advantage that the Romans, accustomed to fighting in open fields with predictable formations, could not counter effectively. Meanwhile, Rome's political elite, far removed from the front lines, pressured generals to advance quickly, ignoring warnings from experienced officers who had studied Gallic tactics. This hubris, combined with overconfidence, set the stage for disaster. The Gauls had studied the Roman army meticulously. They knew their formations, their marching speed, even the ways they would react under stress. What the Romans did not anticipate was that a single, well-timed ambush could unravel the strength of an entire legion. As the armies approached the battlefield, tensions were high. Roman soldiers, proud and disciplined, marched with banners flying, unaware that the ground ahead had been carefully chosen by the Gauls to maximize confusion and fear. Trees, hills, and rivers were used not just as obstacles, but as weapons, guiding Roman troops into kill zones and disorienting their commanders. The moment of contact was chaotic. Roman formations that had never failed before were thrown into disarray by sudden attacks from multiple directions. The Gauls, using a combination of cavalry and infantry, struck hard and fast. Shields clashed, swords gleamed, and the battlefield was filled with the sounds of screaming, metal, and chaos. For the first time, Rome faced an enemy that did not retreat, did not hesitate, and did not fear the consequences of challenging a legendary empire. The second part of our story begins with the full clash of armies. Roman legions, organized in traditional formations, attempted to advance but were immediately thrown off by the Gauls' unorthodox tactics. Unlike the disciplined, predictable Roman maneuvers, the Gauls employed hit-and-run attacks, sudden flanking, and psychological warfare to weaken their enemy. Rivers were dammed and redirected to flood Roman camps. Ambushes struck supply convoys, leaving soldiers hungry and exhausted. Roman commanders, desperate to restore order, tried sending reinforcements, but every attempt was anticipated and countered. By midday, the battlefield had transformed from a place of organized combat into a chaotic nightmare for the Romans. One of the most humiliating moments came when a legion, considered elite and invincible, was surrounded and forced to surrender. Roman standards, symbols of the legion's honor, were captured. Soldiers who had once marched proudly through conquered territories now faced ridicule and shame, not just from the enemy but from their own people. This psychological blow was as damaging as the physical losses. The Gauls, understanding the power of morale, did not immediately slaughter all captives. Instead, they used them as a warning, parading captured soldiers before the remaining legions. This display of power sent a clear message. Rome, despite its grandeur and discipline, was not untouchable. The humiliation of such a defeat reverberated back to the capital, where citizens struggled to comprehend how their mighty army could be bested by what they considered a lesser people. Amid the chaos, individual stories of bravery emerged. Some Roman soldiers fought to the last man, defending their comrades even as defeat became inevitable. Gaulish warriors, too, displayed acts of heroism, charging through fire and spear, refusing to retreat even when facing Roman counterattacks. The battle, therefore, was not just about strategy. It was a clash of cultures, of values, and of human willpower. Strategically, the Gauls exploited every weakness of the Roman system. They targeted the heavily armored units first, knowing that their slower movement would make them vulnerable to flanking. Cavalry units were deployed to cut off escape routes. Confusion was multiplied through noise, smoke, and unexpected terrain obstacles. By the end of the day, the Roman army was scattered, demoralized, and severely weakened. The psychological impact of this battle cannot be overstated. Roman commanders had failed to anticipate the Gauls' cunning. Troops who had believed themselves invincible now questioned their own capabilities. Rome's reputation, built over centuries of conquest and dominance, was now in jeopardy. Stories of the Gauls' audacity spread like wildfire, inspiring fear not only among Romans, but also among neighboring states who had previously been subjugated or allied with the empire. By the conclusion of this second part, the Romans were not merely defeated, they were humiliated. Their standards captured, their formations broken, and their pride shattered, the legions had learned a harsh truth. Even the mightiest empire could be outsmarted and overpowered when arrogance and underestimation meet skill and courage. The aftermath of the battle left Rome in shock. Cities awaited news of their legions with bated breath. The political elite scrambled to understand how such a disaster could have occurred, while historians and chroniclers began documenting the events to prevent future mistakes. The captured soldiers were eventually ransomed or integrated back into the army after severe disciplinary measures. However, the memory of the humiliation lingered. Rome, despite rebuilding its forces, never forgot the lesson taught by the Gauls. Arrogance is dangerous, and even the most disciplined military force can be undone by cunning strategy and courage. Politically, the battle sparked debates about military strategy, leadership, and governance. Commanders were scrutinized for their failures, and reforms were proposed to prevent similar disasters. The Roman military adapted, learning from the experience by incorporating more flexible tactics, better intelligence gathering, and increased respect for enemies once deemed inferior. Culturally, the battle became a symbol of resilience for the Gauls and a cautionary tale for the Romans. It demonstrated that smaller or less technologically advanced societies could challenge empires through unity, knowledge of terrain, and strategic brilliance. The Gauls' victory was celebrated in their homeland for generations, cementing their reputation as warriors who could stand against the greatest empire the world had ever seen. The lessons from this battle echo even today. Power and dominance are never guaranteed. Preparation, respect for opponents, and adaptability are crucial. And perhaps most importantly, pride and overconfidence, no matter how well earned, can lead to the most spectacular of downfalls. So next time you think about empires, legacies, or historical victories, remember the day when the mighty Rome was humbled by the Gauls. A reminder that no empire, no matter how powerful, is ever truly invincible. Before we end this journey into history, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell to discover more untold stories from the past that challenge everything you thought you knew about history. The past has lessons for the present. Don't miss out on them.